Then in 1.10 on page 31, I mentioned the emergence of dispute. That why did dispute arise? So some history of early disputes amongst the Muslims. That when the disputes arose, then people needed rational arguments to counter those the disputes, counteract those disputes. On page 33, I mentioned the Mu'tazila sect. So the Mu'tazila sect was seen as the most rational sect. In fact, they have many admirers amongst those who believe these traditional Sunnis believe in irrational things. They have many admirers amongst non-Muslims and even Muslims who adopt Mu'tazili positions. So in section 1.11, I cover the Mu'tazili sect and the background of the Mu'tazili sect, who they were and the development of the Mu'tazili sect. And how Al-Imam Abu Hasan Al-Ash'ari, rahimahullah ta'ala, how he left the Mu'tazili sect. So the story of Al-Imam Abu Hasan Al-Ash'ari is mentioned. I state, Abu Hasan Al-Ash'ari was a Mu'tazili disciple until he reached the age of 40. A student of the Mu'tazili philosopher Abu Ali al-Jubai. He too held the position that God must do for an individual. This is on page 35. God must do for an individual what is beneficial for that individual, and that it was an obligation on God to do so. So this was a Mu'tazili premise, a proposition. They said God must do what is beneficial for us. So what happened? The traditional Sunni view, on the other hand, was that God was not obliged to do good or bad for the individual and did whatever He willed. The Mu'tazila's view avoided difficult questions like why God created evil or whether humans created their own actions. And thus, to avoid getting stuck, they would, unlike the Sunni, readily reformulate their creed. Do you understand this? At every point, every juncture when they would face difficult questions, the Mu'tazila would reformulate their creed, while the Sunnis had rational arguments ready. This is why for people to prefer the Mu'tazili method, this is flawed, because if they prefer the Mu'tazili method, they would reformulate their creed every week. When they come across arguments that they cannot rationally respond to. While the Sunnis, they had rational arguments ready against every objection against the Quran and the Hadith. One day Abu Hasan Al-Ash'ari asked his teacher Abu Ali al-Jubai, "What do you say regarding three brothers, one of whom died obedient, another disobedient, and the third who died young?" Remember, what did the Mu'tazila say? Allah must do what is better for the person. Ali al-Jubai replied, "The first will be rewarded in paradise, the second will be punished in hell, and the third will not be punished." Al-Ash'ari further inquired, what if the third, the one who died young, asked God why He made him die young, not keeping him alive so that he might have the chance to obey and thus enter paradise? How would God respond? Al-Jubai replied, God would say that He knew the boy would grow up to disobey me, and thereby enter hell, so I did what was better for him. This reply was based on the rule of the Mu'tazila that God must do what is of benefit to the individual. In response to this, Al-Ash'ari said, what if the second brother said, "Why did you not make me die young, so as to have avoided disobeying you and consequently going to hell?" How would God answer that? This question so dumbfounded Al-Jubai that he remained silent, unable to respond. So Al-Jubai became silent, and Al-Imam Abu Hasan Al-Ash'ari went home. He went into seclusion, and then after a few weeks he came back into the public, attended the Friday prayer, ascended the pulpit, the mimbar, and announced that he had left the Mu'tazila and adopted the creed of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah. He adopted the Sunni creed. Because the Sunnis were able to respond to these objections. The Mu'tazila, they claimed to be rational, but whenever they became stuck with a question, they would reformulate their creed. While the Sunnis, they kept their creed the same, but they were able to counteract any arguments against the creed.